Protesters taking it to the streets in New York last night, shutting down traffic throughout the city after the shocking decision by a grand jury not to indict a police officer for a chokehold death of a black man.
The Justice Department has decided to get involved as well by starting its own investigation into the incident. Heather Sells brings us the story.
Who gave you guys the right to choke people?
Across the political spectrum,
when the people are scared of the people that are supposed to protect them, then you know something's wrong.
Outrage and condemnation against a grand jury's decision not to charge a white New York City police officer over the death of Eric Garner, an African-American man.
We see these things happen to us all the time, and it's just come to the point where it's the last straw. And I feel like so many of us, we can't take it anymore.
The Justice Department is now getting involved in the case.
I'm here to announce that the Justice Department will proceed with a federal civil rights investigation into Mr. Garner's death.
On July 17th, Officer Daniel Pantaleo was captured on video using an apparent chokehold on Garner, who was resisting arrest on suspicion of selling cigarettes on the sidewalk. The 400-pound asthmatic was eventually wrestled to the ground and placed in handcuffs. But the video also showed Garner repeatedly gasping, "I can't breathe," as the officers took him down. Pantaleo's supervisor on the scene, an African-American female sergeant, did nothing to stop him from choking Garner. His death was ruled a homicide caused by compression of his throat, the chokehold, and his chest. But the medical examiner also cited other contributing factors like chronic asthma and obesity. The grand jury decision not to indict the officer is drawing criticism from both sides of the political spectrum. Ken White, a libertarian, tweeted, "I don't like Eric Holder and in general don't approve of feds doubling up, but the Eric Garner case merits it. This needs a U.S. attorney." Columnist and Fox News contributor Charles Krauthammer said, "I think anybody who looks at the video would think this was the wrong judgment." Officer Pantaleo issued an apology to the victim's family, but Garner's widow said, "The time for remorse would have been when my husband was yelling to breathe." The verdict touched off a wave of protests in New York and several other cities overnight. But unlike the recent protests in Ferguson, where there was widespread arson and looting, the demonstrations in New York were largely peaceful. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Thanks, Heather. A tale of two cities. In Ferguson, the man involved in that altercation had robbed a convenience store. He was a criminal. He attacked a police officer. He tried to take the police officer's weapon. The struggle took place in the police officer's car. It wasn't this business about being shot in the back, and it wasn't raising your hands and saying, "Hands up, don't shoot." The police officer was in danger of his life, and although we don't like to see anybody killed, he was justified, and the grand jury was justified in what it said. Now, that was Ferguson, and yet Ferguson was torn apart by rioting. The stores may never get back. Jobs may never come back. That town may never recover. We don't know. Now, in New York, you've got a guy, all he did was sell cigarettes on the street. He didn't rob anybody. He didn't attack anybody. And he's selling cigarettes. So a gang of police officers, they're on video, a whole crowd of them, grabbed him to try to get handcuffs on him. And one of them put a chokehold on the man's throat, cut off his wind, and killed him. Now, in that case, it was police brutality. There is no question about it. And yet in that case, again, the grand jury said, well, we can't indict him. And apparently, there was an African-American supervisor standing by a police sergeant who did not stop that horrible incident. Now, you deserve to die because you sell cigarettes on the street? You probably don't deserve to die if you rob a convenience store, but nevertheless, attacking a police officer is one thing. Not wanting to get yourself put in handcuffs is a different thing. And ladies and gentlemen, I do think we've got to speak out about police brutality. It shouldn't be there. I've seen it. Ladies and gentlemen, I was praying with a group of black teenagers years and years ago and was charged by a police dog. I know what it's like to be on the other side, the receiving end of what amounted to racial profiling. It isn't pleasant, and so I understand. But in that Ferguson case, that police officer has been pilloried, and the black people have made a terrible mistake. In New York, because there's so many police and there's so much, traffic around, the demonstrators couldn't get going. But let's get it straight. In one case, brutality, in the other, justifiable homicide. Well, in other news, Texas and 16 other states are going to court to challenge President Obama's executive order on illegal immigrants. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau. Here's John.
Pat, Texas Attorney General and Governor-elect Greg Abbott says the president is abdicating his responsibility to faithfully enforce the laws enacted by Congress and trying to rewrite the law on his own. Texas state leaders say the president's action could lead to a mass arrival of illegal immigrants into the United States. Current Governor Rick Perry says a flood of illegal immigration last summer left Border Patrol agents overwhelmed and unprepared. Even though conservatives say the president abused his constitutional authority, many analysts are encouraging congressional Republicans not to overreact, for example, by shutting down the government. Well, what should America's role in the world be? A leader or just leading from behind? That was the topic of debate and discussion at a forum here in Washington. Paul Strand has that story.
At a Washington event meant to examine what America's foreign policy should look like, Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz declared it shouldn't look like today's, with America no longer a robust leader of the world.
And into that vacuum have stepped nations like Russia, like China, like Iran, and it has not made the world a safer place.
Cruz even joked about President Obama's lack of leading on the world stage.
Just a few months ago, Jimmy Carter criticized this president for being weak on foreign policy. Holy cow!
Another Republican lawmaker laid out the stark contrast in visions for American action.
On one hand, there's a view that, we only act when it's in our absolute core interest. In essence, if Canada or Mexico is attacking us, then we're going to act. Otherwise, nowhere else, really. And then, of course, you have the belief in more what I am, which is an engaged America is good for the whole world.
A couple of panelists urged caution when it comes to waging war, even the war on terror.
Let's not double down on some of the failures of our past. Let's try to, before we jump into something, let's try to remember some of the lessons of the last, since the end of the Cold War.
There was talk that America often takes actions without considering what the reactions might be. As an example, James Carafano of the Heritage Foundation brought up the evil acts of ISIS terrorists.
I look at beheadings as kind of their response to drone strikes. We do a drone strike, say, look, we can reach out and touch you. And they go, yeah, dude, well, watch this. And they cut somebody's head off. And they said, look, we can reach out and touch people too.
But because brutal groups like ISIS can threaten the world, some panelists were saying no matter how much war-weary Americans may not want boots on the ground, it may be absolutely necessary.
It is the job of our military to hunt down our enemies and kill them before they kill us.
I think we might have to contemplate doing a few weeks of sustained special operations raids with Iraqi special forces once the counteroffensive begins.
And Cruz insisted that in what he called a world on fire, America must engage because there is no alternative.
These problems are insoluble without American leadership.
Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
A year after the massive Typhoon Haiyan hit the Philippines, another super typhoon is on its way. This one is called Hagupit, and it could affect 2/3 of the country's provinces. It's projected to make landfall Saturday, but isn't expected to be as devastating as last year's storm. Haiyan claimed more than 6,300 lives and cost around $12 billion in damages. Well, CBN's disaster relief teams are still on the ground more than a year after Haiyan. Their latest project, an organic farm helping countless families earn a livelihood. George Thomas brings us that story from the Philippines.
Nympha Babula knows how fortunate she is to be alive today.
Nothing was left of our possessions. Our house was destroyed. All our belongings gone.
A year ago, the world's most powerful storm to ever hit land slammed into the Philippines, killing thousands.
I told my sons we will overcome this adversity. We were given a second chance to live, and that's why we will overcome this.
in a small village not too far from her destroyed community. Babula and 60 other Filipino families are putting that spirit to work at a unique CBN disaster relief organic farm.
We learn about hard work and the techniques of organic farming. And of course, when you plant, you will harvest. And that's why I'm so happy to be part of this project.
The farm is a first of its kind in this region.
We plant tomatoes, potatoes, chilies, peppers, corn, bitter melon, string beans. We use no chemicals, and so we are able to teach the people to eat what is good for their bodies.
The goal is to give families who've lost everything a sustainable livelihood that can also build self-confidence.
People have a mindset that they cannot do it, but we are teaching and giving them agriculture training so they will learn how to earn a living. And now that they have harvested, they are happy.
As a single mother of 6, Babula was struggling to put food on the table before the typhoon hit.
I used to sell food that I cooked in the market, but I was not earning that much money.
But now trips to the market have taken on new significance.
I can't wait to bring the vegetables to the market. Thank you very much, CBN. Because of your help, we are able to stand again. In time, I know that our farm will become bigger and we will earn more. Thank you for giving us hope.
And judging from the huge success of this project, CBN Disaster Relief is planning to start a piggery, poultry, and fish farm.
It is not enough to give houses to victims of the typhoon. We need to give them means of livelihood. And that's what's happening with this farm. We help them get up on their feet, assure their sustainability, and help them build back better.
George Thomas, CBN News, Palo Leyte, Philippines.
Pat, I love what he just said, building lives to be better than what they were before.
It's marvelous. And ladies and gentlemen, you know that old saying that you give a man a fish, you feed him for one day, you teach him how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. Well, I think what we're doing is trying to teach these people how to be fed for a lifetime so they can have sustainable agriculture. The Philippines are very warm and the climate is ideal for growing all sorts of things. And if they have the proper tools and the understanding of what to do, they can be certainly very much self-sufficient. Doesn't need to be poverty there because there's enough to feed the whole population if they know how to grow the food. So if you want to help something like this in this emergency, you can call in 1-800-759-0700, or you can log on to CBN Center, Virginia Beach, Virginia. That's the CBN Disaster Relief Fund. So CBN has got one, and then we also have Operation Blessing operating in other parts of the world. So we're out there trying to help the poor and the needy.
An American couple is finally free after a 2-year ordeal with the government of Qatar. Matthew and Grace Wang were cleared of charges in their adopted daughter's death last week. But when they tried to leave the country, they were held in the airport and had their passports confiscated. Yesterday, they were told they could leave Qatar. The couple was arrested in 2013 after their adopted daughter died unexpectedly. The Huangs say they are relieved and are heading home to Los Angeles. A Florida judge has temporarily suspended Fort Lauderdale's ban on feeding the homeless. The city ordinance aimed at keeping people from feeding the homeless in parks and other public places has generated nationwide controversy, especially after Arnold Abbott, a 90-year-old homeless advocate, was cited for repeatedly defying it. The judge suspended enforcement of the ordinance for 30 days and ordered mediation on the issue. City attorneys may appeal that ruling. And CBN News will bring you a story on Arnold Abbott and his ministry on an upcoming edition of the 700 Club. And you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.